Hello there. We're still in 1 Samuel 23 and just a couple of verses at 15. Um, well, just at 14, really. David remained in the strongholds of the wilderness, having fled from Keilah, where the people were going to betray him. And he fled because Saul gave up the chase when he heard that he'd left Keilah. And David went into the strongholds in the wilderness of Ziph in the hill country. And Saul sought him every day, but God did not give him into his hand. The chasing after David got more intense, but David was never where Saul was to be caught. And David was afraid because Saul came out to seek his life. And sometimes we think that David, being the great warrior against Goliath, being the great psalm writer, that he was never afraid. But we can read in many of the psalms that he was afraid at times. There were times when his humanity came to the fore and he was afraid. And this was one of them. When Saul was pursuing him relentlessly, he was afraid. He didn't know what was going. He knew God was going to look after him, but Saul kept coming, chasing him, and he was afraid. We see the same thing in Elijah's life. Elijah, had the great victory on Carmel, and then following on that, there was an adverse reaction to that from Jezebel, and he fled for his life because he was afraid. And it's human to be afraid. When everything seems to be going our way, and suddenly it turns again, and there's difficulty, our natural fear comes to the fore. And it's at that point that God is so good to us, as he was good to David. Look what he did with David. Look at 1 Samuel 23, verse 15. David was afraid. David was in the wilderness of Ziph, and Jonathan, Saul's son, rose and went to David at Horesh and strengthened his hand in God. And that's the wonderful thing. When we're up against it and we're afraid, God sends us help. He understands our frailty. He understands how difficult it is sometimes for us to hang on in our humanity to the things he's promised us. And David was the same. And what did God send? God sent Jonathan, David's best friend, Saul's heir, to see him. And Jonathan strengthened his hand in God. Jonathan went and spoke to him the truths of God to encourage him. What Jonathan didn't do was wallow with him in the fear. He lifted him up and strengthened him. And this is what we need to do for each other when things are really difficult, when we're struggling and when we don't know what to do and we are afraid, and someone who comes along who loves the Lord comes along, God will give them the words that they need to encourage us. So when we have friends who love the Lord who are struggling, the last thing we should do is totally empathize with their situation. Our role is to bring faith and encouragement and words of strengthening and a reminder of how faithful God has been in the past. I'm sure Jonathan said to David, look how often God has helped you escape from the hands of Saul, and he will keep doing it until, and Saul says, you shall be king over Israel, and I shall be next to you. He's saying to him, hang on until God gives you the kingdom, and I will be your second in command. He knew that God had a purpose for David, and that God's purpose for David was to be king, and his purpose for Jonathan was not to be king. And he was happy for that to be the situation. And the two of them made a covenant together. They covenanted their life for each other, that they would protect each other, they would strengthen each other, they would be there for each other as long as they lived. They made a covenant, an agreement. And I think that's wonderful, that when we are right down under it and we can't go on, we feel we can't go on, God will send us somebody to encourage us and to lift us up and to help us on our way. So, as you think about these thoughts for today, think about people you know who may need you to be their Jonathan today. They may need you to be their word of encouragement and strength today. Ask the Lord, who of your friends needs a Jonathan? Someone who can go, not to wallow with them, not to say how awful this all is, but to lift them up and strengthen them on their path forward. God bless you. Have a great day. I will see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.